You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast. And welcome to Speculative Evolution.
Hello, David.
Yeah, what's up, Will?
And hello, listeners. Welcome to Cutie!
Cutie! The second ever Cutie!
Yes! We've brought it back. Last year we did our first ever Cute-E to follow up Spook-E, where we talk about creepy creatures and monsters. Cuties, where we do the same thing in discussing how would we evolve these strange creatures, but for cute things.
Yeah, well, because Spook-E is a bit sort of limited.
Yeah.
It's about scary monstery stuff. Cutie is for cute stuff.
Well, and there's a whole bunch of things that fall within the exact same stories as all those other creatures that are just too cute to be called monsters.
Yes.
I always say that, and then I think of like all the things on Sesame Street are technically monsters.
Absolutely. So we're using.
This is where we do that kind of monster.
This is where we do cute monsters.
We will be discussing how could this creature evolve under the rules of our real-world natural selection. What would it take to get something that fits the description of, in this case, a jackalope? Jackalopes!
This is it. This is what took the fairy slot.
Cutie. I was doing the notes, and as I kept doing the notes for jackalope and then did the notes for fairy, I went, I think these actually...
I think we need to switch them. I'm super excited for this. This is a very fun choice.
This is the one I've been second most excited for after Gremlins for this year. For this discussion, we're just having fun. We are not meaning to do any official historical point of view or evolutionary point of view on these creatures. It's just silly good times. And for all of them, this is the most fitting for silly good times. This creature is so good for this. Let's jump in and talk about the Jumpalope. Let's hop in.
The jackalope.
The jackalope. This is a North American folklore creature.
Mm-hmm.
And so it comes from that era of tall tales of North America, the settling of North America, and colonization of North America with, Paul Bunyan and that kind of stories. Jackalope falls within that category of myth. And it is extremely simply a jackrabbit with antlers.
Yep.
That's it.
That's what it is. That's a jackalope.
That's a jackalope. Funnily enough, it's often described as being with antelope horns, which is why it's a jackalope.
Sure.
But it always is with deer antlers.
Yeah.
Like this, the jackalopes you'll see are always deer antlers. Because the antelopes we have here aren't actually antelopes.
Right.
We have pronghorns, which are Antilocapra. So they're called the North American antelope, but they're not antelopes. And
they don't have antlers.
They don't have antlers. They're pronghorns. Theirs is a unique, weird thing just to them.
Yep.
And they don't use those on jackalopes. It's always just shed antlers.
Those are easier to find.
Yep, and easier to mount.
Yep, yes.
This is the creature. It has a very fun history. It is even known by a genus name of Lepus antilocapra.
Funny. Which they're also named after the pronghorn, even though that's not
Absolutely.
the horns.
Yep. The jackrabbit part is also a bit of a misnomer in that it's usually actually hares.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah. It's not actually rabbit that's used, it's hares.
Now, we're talking about this with some level of familiarity.
Yep.
And I don't know very much about jackalope, like deep lore or mythos or anything, but I've seen mounts of jackalopes.
Absolutely.
That's a thing if you travel, especially through like the American West, if you're out across the Great Plains, you'll just see jackalopes mounted places.
And that is where their fame comes from. Mm-hmm. You'll find them mounted at bars and rest stops and gas stations, hotels, all sorts of things throughout the West and Midwest.
This is a rare case of a spooky creature where the myths are from where we live.
Yes, absolutely.
So often we're reaching across the world for other things. I've seen this one.
This is a wholly North American and U.S.
A U.S. creature.
Myth. Their fame coming from those taxidermies is actually how they got started. They can be traced back to the 1930s when Douglas Herrick and his brother in Douglas, Wyoming, which is very fitting, put together the first jackalope.
Named Douglas,
right? Douglas, and Douglas. They were hunters and taxidermists. Okay. They had some taxidermy skills at least. And they put together the first jackalope using a hare and some antlers.
Mm-hmm.
A New York Times article about it attributes the origin to 1932 when they went hunting, came back after hunting, and there it listed as jackrabbits, but I saw it very often noted that there would actually be hares. But came back with some form of a rabbit cousin. And as the story goes, Herrick tossed one of the rabbits onto like the counter in their shop, in their taxidermy lodge or whatever, and it landed near a pair of antlers. They noted it, thought it was funny, and decided to make a jackalope. The first jackalope was sold for $10 to Roy Ball and displayed in the Douglas La Bonte Hotel. It was a mounted head, which was stolen in 1977.
Oh, no. At the price of fame.
Right? Absolutely. like the Mona Lisa.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the first jackalope.
This is a very similar history.
It belongs in a museum.
Equal notoriety, I think.
It's got that little smile. No eyebrows.
It became a attraction for Douglas, Wyoming, and has become a mascot for the town. Nowadays, in the town of Douglas, there's an 8-foot tall statue of a jackalope, 2.4 meters. The town hosts annual Jackalope Day celebrations in early June. And since then, other taxidermists have continued the tradition, and now there are jackalopes all over the place. I think Herrick made other taxidermists, jackalopes that got sold off, but the tradition has been continued by others. One that I found noted was Frank English in Rapid City, South Dakota.
I've been there.
Followed off of this success and made and sold. They listed thousands of jackalopes.
Wow. There's a lot of hares and there's a lot of deer out there.
Yeah, exactly. These are both things that
those are easy to come by.
Renew every year.
Yeah, one deer can make many sets of antlers, and 2 rabbits can make a lot of rabbits.
Yep, absolutely. So it's a renewable resource. And he's become one of the notable sellers of jackalopes. He was the only supplier of jackalopes to Cabela's, a major outdoor-themed retail store, and has the world record for jackalope sales at $150 for a jackalope.
This does make me wonder if I've seen a jackalope specifically at a Cabela's or specifically in Rapid City.
Right.
And I don't know. I don't remember. For sure I saw a jackalope at Waldrug. There's got to be a jackalope at Waldrug.
This sparked the jackalope to become a tall-tale creature.
Mm-hmm.
So it started fully as a goof.
Yes.
This was
not even like a hoax.
Yes.
Just as a joke.
Just as a goof, but it gained its own stories and it gained its own mythos, and it became this creature of the out west. There were tons of creatures that fall into these tall-tale creatures. You know, the furry trout, what's it called? The rock-belly slider, and all of those kinds of fun, over-the-top creatures.
Yes.
Those football-shaped snakes.
Yes.
The loaf snakes.
Yep. Yeah, a series of other creatures that were also briefly considered for this year's Spook-E.
Yep. With this addition to the tall tales, they also started getting tall tales about themselves.
Sure.
And so there's a bunch of jackalope facts, quote unquote, that will often be shared about the biology and behavior of the jackalope. Jackalopes are said to be quite dangerous, quite aggressive.
Sure.
So when hunting them, it is suggested that you wear stovepipes over your legs so that they can't gore you with their antlers.
Okay.
So protect your legs with some stovepipes. Remember, these are tales from the 1930s, so yes. Some of the references.
Stovepipes.
Stores in Douglas sold jackalope milk. The New York Times questioned its authenticity based on the grounds that milking a jackalope is known to be extremely risky. So it's not likely that they're probably
not actually because they're dangerous.
That would be really hard to get.
Well, and it's hard to crouch down to milk a jackalope when you're wearing your stovepipes.
Exactly. So most jackalope milk you find is probably not legit. Just be buyer beware. One of the ways to catch a jackalope is to entice it with one of its favorite dishes, whiskey.
Sure, of course.
Its beverage of choice.
This is the Midwest.
Yep, as it is a well-known, their favorite drink. It's also noted that they are vocal creatures. Specifically, it was noted that when cowboys would be singing around a campfire, the jackalope would often join in, specifically in a tenor.
Okay.
It would fill in the tenor part.
Sure. So if you only had 3, if your barbershop quartet is down 1,
they might stand in for the night.
All right.
They breed only during lightning flashes. And
so they're real quick about it.
Yeah, and their antlers make it difficult, so this is part of why they're so rare.
Okay.
So despite the hare's reputation for fertility, they struggle with it. And this is my favorite one, the Chamber of Commerce will issue jackalope hunting licenses.
Okay.
But they're good for hunting only during official jackalope season, which occurs only 1 day a year on June 31st from midnight to 2 a.m.
Fantastic.
And evidently, I didn't find any descriptions. Evidently, there are other versions of the license that are equally impossible to follow.
Yes, February 30th.
Yes.
Yeah. Delightful when the government gets in on a joke.
I love it. The hunters, to qualify for the license, you also have to have an IQ greater than 50, but no greater than 72. And evidently, thousands of these have been issued.
Oh, I believe it. Absolutely, I believe it.
There have also been attempts to have official recognition of the jackalope in Wyoming as their main mythological creature.
Cool. Like the state myth
The
or something?
The state myth tall tale creature. And it's happened multiple times in recent years. It gets shot down basically every time. One of the co-sponsors of this push, Dan Swanitzer, said, "I'll keep bringing it back until it passes." And in 2014, Wyoming Lottery adopted the jackalope as the logo for its lottery tickets. And so it's become a mascot and has become its own tall tale creature, but all of it very tongue-in-cheek.
Yes.
Very in on the joke. And a number of folklorists I saw quoted and referenced emphasize that it is a fun hoax, not a con.
Yes. You're not trying to trick anybody.
Yeah. And
it's just to have fun.
And at worst, if you do trick someone, it's just for the momentary joke. And then once you realize you've been tricked, you're now in on the joke.
Yes. Now it's funny.
And now you can go show other people your jackalope license.
Yes.
And so it's a harmless prank, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got a very interesting position because it's never been treated as an actual cryptid, really.
Right. You'll see it on those lists of Bigfoot, Loch Ness, jackalope. Well, it'll be treated in that sort of category. But it isn't one of the... People aren't out looking for this. People don't actually believe that this mythical creature exists, at least not for very long.
Yes, and
until the joke is revealed.
Not very commonly. You will see it every now and then. I found one telling of a specific folklorist, Richard Dorson, who acknowledged earlier accounts and potential sightings of jackalopes.
Okay.
And so there are claimed other origins for where the myth came from.
Right. How delightful to have a mythological creature that we can talk about where we can point at the guys that invented it.
Yep, the two dudes.
It's like those guys in their lodge.
There has been talk, though, about where the idea for a horned rabbit came from and where that wider concept, because there are other similar stories and creatures outside the jackalope.
Okay.
Not directly connected to it, but this is not the only horned rabbit in myth, and it's not the only time stories like that have been told. So there have been people who have suggested that perhaps some of the inspiration for the idea might have come from these other stories. They might have been influenced or inspired by the fact that there are other people who have told similar stories.
Or at least its popularity might have caught on better because there was this precedent for it.
There are a few different examples. In the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, in Renaissance texts, there's the Lepus cornatus, or horned hare, which is basically just a jackalope. It's much more of a bunny looking, it's usually more down and in that bunny pose instead of that upright hare pose.
Okay.
That's not got the tall, gangly proportions that hares tend to have. So it looks more like a rabbit with antlers, but it is just a rabbit with antlers.
Cool. Couple of Victorian guys threw a rabbit onto a
Yep.
thing and the horns were there.
This one is listed in the text as both a farcical and mythical thing, but also at times described as an actual creature that might be out there.
Okay.
So it has that kind of medieval situation where some people were describing it as, yeah, somewhere out there. I haven't seen one, but I've been told for sure.
Right.
There is also in Arabic myths from medieval times, the Mirage or Al-Mirage, which specifically comes from versions of the Legend of Iskandar, which is another name for Alexander the Great.
Huh.
Fans of the Fate series, that's what that is. This is a creature that lived on Sea Serpent Island or Dragon Island in the Indian Ocean, where Iskandar went to defeat the dragons. After killing the dragons, or driving them off, or whatever version of defeating the monsters happens in that version of the story, the islanders give a gift to him, which is a mirage or al-mirage, and it's a creature that resembles a yellow or golden hare or rabbit with a single black horn like a unicorn.
Oh, interesting.
And so in some of the artwork, sometimes it looks a bit more like a hound or, kind of more doggish, but it's a rabbit with a unicorn horn. It is said to have the feature that all wild beasts flee from it, and is similar to another unicorn-like creature in other Arabic myths. So it might have some similarities with, cross-pollination with other myths like that. There's also the Wolpertinger, which is a Germanic version of this kind of creature. This one has a bit more of a chimera thing going on. Its body is composed of various wings, antlers, tails, and fangs attached to the body of some small animal. Most typically, the head of a rabbit, the body of a squirrel, the antlers of a deer, and the wings and occasionally legs of a pheasant.
Huh.
Yeah. So this one's got a jackalope going for it, but it's also got wings and sometimes other griffin-esque legs going on.
I wonder if the body of a squirrel means the tail of a squirrel.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do we define that? I think some of them had would be made with pheasant tails, if I remember right.
Oh, interesting.
This one also is famous for being taxidermied.
Okay.
You'll find stuffed Wolpertingers in hotels and bars and stuff around. It's a particular forest, but I can't remember the name of the forest right now, in Germany. There's also the Rasselbuck, which is also Germanic and is just a rabbit with antlers again. This one, though, I didn't find as much solid. The Wikipedia for this has no cited stuff on it. Okay. So I don't know if this one's as common.
Someone on Wikipedia heard of it.
Yep. So this one might be another one of those. I saw it referenced by a couple of the other pages, but there were no references to...
If there's any fans of the Rasselbuck out there, let us know.
So the Rasselbuck may be a fake horned hare. Just...
Okay, yeah. This one might not be legit.
This one might not be real. Some people have also pointed out that there are horned rodents, which aren't... rabbits aren't rodents, but there are
They're pretty close.
There's the horned gopher, Ceratogalus, which had 2 rhino horns kind of on the nose. Mm-hmm. So horned animals like that are not wholly unreasonable. This has brought up the question of why do we see so many stories around the world of horned rabbits of some sort? And most people point to the Shope papillomavirus, which is a virus that causes keratinous tumors to grow out of the skin and is very common in rabbits. This ends up looking like kind of matted hair, but they are actually keratinized. So there are hard growths. They'll come out in kind of shaggy, concreted clumps. They look very horn-like because of how they grow out of a spot. So you end up with these kind of long, hard growths. They'll dangle they can grow pretty much anywhere all over, but they are very common on the head and face. They are not specifically to the head, and so they are not in the position of horns on the head always, but you will definitely be able to find rabbits infected with this that have a horny structure coming off the face. Mm-hmm. It is most common in Midwestern North America.
Interesting.
And also occurs in Europe.
All right.
It was initially examined in wild cottontail rabbits, and is often referred to as horned or warty rabbits that are infected. So it's likely that at least some of these versions of these tales might have been inspired by seeing a rabbit infected with this particularly badly that has a head seemingly covered in an antler-esque structure.
Yeah.
You can look this, if you look up jackalope, there's pictures of this in the Wikipedia and stuff. And it's pretty intense. And that's it. That's the jackalope.
Very fun. And humans also really like to put horns on stuff.
Yeah, we do. It's a very easy way to decorate things.
Yep.
To give your monster some flair that it lacked beforehand. And so, yeah, that's the jackalope and its international cousins.
Yes, its extended family.
Yep. This is a very interesting entry. As we said, at least for the jackalope and the Wolpertinger are actual commonly taxidermied creatures. So like,
yeah, it's fascinating to hear that there's a German version of that.
Yeah, and from what I heard when I was reading up on it, it sounds like it also has a similar origin, that it was just created one day and sold to a place. And so it is a very similar situation. And so now we can start talking about the evolution for this creature, which also does not require that much of a magical disclaimer.
No. We don't really need a magic. It's not really a magic creature.
Yeah, so there's tall tale stuff that's, fantastical, but none of those are actually impossible.
Yeah.
Mimicking humans isn't impossible. So,
as always, the big questions with evolving our speculative monsters are where do they come from and why are they the way that they are? Now, starting with the question of antlers... Because antlers serve a function.
Yes.
Right? Answering the question of why do you have antlers is a very easy place to start, because lots of animals have antlers or horns, and we have a very good sense of what they use them for.
Yes.
They are defensive. They can certainly be defensive. They are most often a competitive structure.
Absolutely.
Like deer and elk and sheep and animals that have the, ungulates that have these head horns are very commonly using them to fight against each other.
And it can either be for directly headbutting or to show.
To posture.
To avoid the fight because, listen, my antlers are twice the size of yours. There's not even a point to this.
Yes.
Just get out of my way.
Now, typically, we see those structures on larger mammals.
Yep.
Deer and bison and things like that. You did mention before, there are fossil examples of horned rodents.
Absolutely.
Ceratogalus, the horned gopher, which is a nose horn. It's this pair of, I assume that they're keratinous, like a rhino horn. Although they might be bony.
I think they are bony. I think they're bony.
Yeah,
they're on the skull.
Pair of bony horns on the end of the snout, which we actually talked about them in a news not too long ago because our friend Josh published a paper about them. And one of the ideas for what the function of those horns were is that these are animals that live in burrows and stuff that might point their horns up at the exit of the burrow to ward off any predator who wants to come digging in here.
Which I love because a common idea earlier on was that they might be using it to dig with.
Yes.
So I like that it's very satisfying, the idea that they still are burrow related, but maybe not for burrow construction, burrow defense.
Yes.
That's fun.
So there is some precedent for some kind of horn-like structure on the face of a rodent. Rabbits are not rodents, but they are very closely related.
Yes. And you could easily get a rodent that is very rabbit-shaped.
Absolutely.
Like, we have those with kangaroo rats and stuff that are long back-legged, hopping, very agile rodents.
I do also want to entertain a thought, which is if it is a leap to evolve full-on antlers onto a rabbit, it might be less of a leap to evolve a very small deer.
That's what I've been thinking.
that was one of my early thoughts.
Yep.
Because deer have a lot of rabbit-like features. You mentioned before that hares tend to be sort of gangly.
Yeah, they're built for running.
Yes, they're very high speed. Deer are often very good at leaping. You have small deer-like creatures like springboks and stuff that are famous for jumping. So another angle here could be to just skip the antler question and just make it a tiny deer.
Yep. And we have some really small deer species, and I think, to my knowledge, most of them are less notably antlered. Like, they tend to have smaller antlers. They tend to be a little bit less exaggerated with the size of their antlers. And I don't know if there are any that are practically antler. I feel like some of the smallest ones have very little antler going.
That sort of fits my, loose knowledge of those animals. And that might be a function of the environment that they live in.
Yep.
It might be that the smaller species are just less competitive in that way.
And I definitely think, I've seen it, I think, attributed to the fact that a lot of them are underbrush. Like, lots of deer are forest dwellers.
Yes.
But there's a difference between forest and the underbrush of the forest.
Where you're actually just going to get your antlers caught in a bunch of stuff.
They're just going to tangle up in things.
I do like that. The other thing that I do like about the deer angle is that I don't know. I mean, rabbits can be noisy.
Yes.
Rabbits absolutely can sort of make noise. To my knowledge, rabbits and most rodents aren't like communicative noisy.
Yeah, not famously. Like, there's some that come up of like the howling mouse, the grasshopper mouse, and stuff like that. But generally, they're not super vocal at a distance.
Yes, but elk are.
Yeah, exactly.
Elk bugle.
Yes,
they do that ridiculous bugle noise, which is one of the things that I thought of when you mentioned the jackalopes singing with people.
And I'm picturing like that country crooning that is so famous in westerns, and with how that the yodeling, that's where I was looking for. The yodeling of that country style. And like, you can trigger wolves to howl if you as a group do a group. So like, I could picture a bunch of people yodeling to their guitar and like, holding notes, just being silly and maybe a bit inebriated, and that triggering them to do their little itty bitty bugle.
Yes. I quite like that idea.
Yep. Here's an idea that because I was thinking, like, if they're small, usually you're small to be able to get in, you're being small and out in the open is not usually a awesome combination. So like, small things are either under the underbrush or in burrows or being in places where they can take advantage of being small to hide. And that's what I was assuming that in my head, because that's how rabbits live.
Yeah, rabbits, kangaroo rats. Yeah. They are good at traversing open areas.
Yes, but they want to huddle down.
When it's time to not be seen, you go hide somewhere.
And I was like, well, if you have antlers, would you be able to burrow? And then I had the realization that antlers are seasonal.
That's true.
I like that for a couple reasons. That means that they could absolutely be living in ways that make it beneficial to be small. Mm-hmm. And then just during mating season, they come out and are more, can't live that way because they have antlers.
Yeah.
Which also fits with them being rare.
Yes.
You only see jackalopes very rarely.
Yeah, because they don't have antlers.
Yeah, and the rest of the year they're not a jackalope.
That could also fit with their reputation of being hyper-aggressive.
Yes.
That when you have the antlers, you have to be out in the open. So if you come across a hawk or a coyote or something, you have to be ready to fight because you can't hide very effectively.
Yep. The other reason I like it being a deer of some sort is they've got cloven hooves. They've got separated hooves, so those could very easily be adapted into little claw-like paws. Like,
yeah,
those are already, especially for some of the small ones, are already kind of claw-like. Yes. And the small ones, it is not this giant hoof; it's just a little hoof at the end. Mm-hmm. So, like, of all the hoofed mammals, they feel like they'd be very likely to get kind of rabbit-esque hands and feet.
Yeah. Well, and if you're getting down to that sort of rabbit size, being shaped in your limbs more like a rabbit makes sense, right? If you're going to be pawing through the underbrush a little bit, if you need a spring jump to start your bounding, because deer also run very similar to how rabbits do. It's a bounding or a half-bounding motion. So you could even get those sort of larger back legs for that kicking defense and that bounding. The other thought that I had to get at, because part of this unusual combination of very small size, dwelling at least partially out in the open, having big antlers, which are sort of, we don't seem to see those traits altogether in either small cervids or rabbits. So this is an unusual species, which made me think, of the idea that they originated as an island species.
Yep.
Because on an island, we often see large creatures get small, but if it's an island where there aren't a lot of predators or competitors, you can get away with being out in the open more often. And if you're out in the open more often, there's more of a drive for that competition.
Mm-hmm.
There's more of leniency for you to be vocally communicative, to find your mates or attract others of your species. And then you can do those postures or those headbutting because you're one of the biggest things around.
Yep.
Because you're on an island. And there's not a lot of predators around here, and you don't have to worry about getting caught during that.
Well, and it also makes it feasible for you to evolve into an unusual niche for your group. Like,
yes.
They don't need to be burrowing. They're never particularly described as burrowing.
Sure. But you like the idea of them burrowing.
Rabbits are burrowing?
Well, and even if they're not digging burrowing, going into burrows.
Yes.
Or rabbits also make those little game trails,
yes,
like through the underbrush, which deer also make game trails.
Yes.
They're bigger game trails, but that is a habit that they both semi-share.
Mm-hmm. So, but like living in a more similar, either full-on burrow or burrow-adjacent lifestyle is more permissible on an island because there's probably not as much competition. There may not be another burrower there.
Yes.
So you might be the first one that can go, well, I can dig better than any of the birds here, so I can actually get down to some of the roots and tubers.
I also like this idea because we don't even need to go into the ocean.
Yep.
To get an island, because the northern Midwest of the U.S. has tons of lakes.
Yes.
That can have island lakes.
Uh-huh.
Or little lake island, islands in the middle of a lake.
Yes.
Or it could be a high elevation thing where they originated and it acted like an island. The idea that these are just like a super tiny deer species that evolved on a lake in like Minnesota or something, on a little island in the middle of a lake. I don't know if you've put any thought yet to the idea of how they go from being an island species to being mainland.
I've been thinking about it a little bit.
And there is absolutely, it could just happen.
Yes.
But also if they became very popular with people.
Yep.
Then people could have just taken them and accidentally or on purpose released them into the wild.
Absolutely.
And now they're all across the U.S. That could also be how you get populations in Europe and in the Middle East because they were in the pet trade.
Yep, that's where I was thinking.
Yep.
Because then it's got, like we were talking about with the gremlins, it's got that humans spread them, just like humans spread them here.
Exactly. We have gotten far away from the other suggestion I was going to make, which I love this, so we don't have to go this way, but I want to mention it. To be as true as possible to the original origin, I was also considering the idea of it's just a rodent or a rabbit that wears antlers.
Yep.
That physically puts antlers on its head as a disguise or something.
Or makes nests in them.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I like this. It's got all the fun weirdness. I like the island species stuff, which also fits nicely with the Iskandar.
Yes. Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Which came from an island.
Absolutely.
So I like them being island species. I like them having paw-like hooves.
Sure.
That's very fun. The only thing that's kind of, and this is kind of getting nitpicky, but since we've already gotten so much of it already, we can get nitpicky. The least rabbity thing about deer is they don't have any upper incisors. They don't have very rabbit-like teeth.
That is true.
They have lower front teeth, but their upper, where their upper front teeth would be, is just a very thick pad.
That's true.
So they'd have to either move some teeth from the back up front, which is very possible.
Absolutely.
Or something else.
I was going to suggest, my first thought upon that is, A, they could have shorter muzzles. So more like a rabbit, especially if you aren't being as picky in your feeding or if you're eating food that's all very close down to you. But also, I don't know about deer or other... there are saber-toothed deer.
Yes.
There are deer that have, and I guess those are incisors?
Oh, I don't know.
They might be premolars.
They might be premolars.
I don't know. But it is not at all unheard of for ungulates, for hoofed animals, to take either the incisor or a premolar from the back and make it into a bit more of a fang or tusk. Camels have just full-on fangs.
Yep.
And there are deer that have those extra long canine-like teeth.
Yeah, musk deer and stuff like that. And all the ones that I'm familiar with that have them are smaller species.
Yes. And that would fit very nicely with this animal that we're crafting that does a lot of competitive behavior.
Yeah.
Those teeth they might be for biting, that you're just biting each other, or it could be more of that posture, that display. I've got the teeth, I've got the antlers, I've got a bugle. These are ways that I both show off to potential mates and intimidate potential rivals.
Yeah, I like all of that. I like that it's kind of what we were talking about with the red cap, where it has lots of layers of aggression.
Yes.
I like that here, but they're all harmless to us.
Absolutely. Yes, it's not actually going to do you any harm.
Like, even if it just goes to town on you, the bite might hurt, but it's not going to send you to the hospital.
Yeah.
And it's just that it's like when hamsters, or like you see things of rodents, trying to intimidate or something.
Yeah. Now, the other thing, this is an easy one, but rabbits have big ears, which for a open environment dwelling animal, big ears can be helpful for cooling and heating. Also, we have established that this is a vocally communicative species, so that works nicely. Also, and this is just this one's a little bonus for fun. It could be that their island home is also home to a diverse assemblage of fungi. Now, stick with me. I'm going with fungi. I'm bringing up fungus again because that's what's on my brain. But if they are incorporating certain fungi into their diet on that island, maybe to supplement a more limited diet, there's not as much variety of food there, so they are eating certain fungi, or there are fungi in association with the plants they eat, that could give them a predisposition to be attracted towards fermented foods.
Oh, okay.
And give them their taste for alcohol.
I like that. I like that a lot.
And so they're going if there's alcohol, that's where they evolved in an environment where they go for foods like fungi to supplement their limited island diet.
Yeah, and now they have a natural behavior to seek that out.
Yes, so if you're out there with your banjo yodeling with your buddies late into the night with your moonshine or whatnot, you hear them bugling, and then also they come over sniffing around for the whiskey.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. Also, you talking about the ears made me realize that, like, deer don't have small ears for their body size.
They already have pretty substantial ears.
If you just don't, if they're, when they size down, they just don't do it fully proportionately, and their ears stay
that's true
more moderately, normally sized, then they would have big ears once they're small. Also, deer already have very rabbit-like tails. Yeah,
absolutely. Deer are very rabbit-like.
Yeah, they're a lot more rabbit-like than I realized.
And this is in large part because they've converged on a very similar lifestyle.
Yes.
These are mammal herbivores well adapted for high-speed movement in open or semi-open environments.
Fast plant eaters.
Yeah.
It's a good shape to be.
That absolutely. So it's not a difficult leap to make.
Yep, but it's fun because, like, I've often compared rabbits to horses when I talk to people, because they've got long limbs, the fused bones,
the hindgut fermentation.
Yeah, like they are very horse-like, but a horse is not very rabbit-like in a lot of those other things that we were just. They do have tiny ears. They have a very long face. They have a very long neck. They have a very short tail with long hair. Deers also have long necks, but that can be shortened up. There's short-necked deers.
Absolutely.
But deer are that might be the better go-to example when I make it in the future.
This also has the nice angle. We mentioned that they could have been transported around the world by humans in the pet trade and whatnot. But there are deer and antelope in many parts of the world. So you could also get a convergent evolution of a similar anatomy, because there are deer in Europe and elk. There are antelope in the Middle Eastern region. And those places also have islands.
Yes, they do.
So you could have these tiny horned deer evolving convergently in a few different places.
This was just one of those ping pongs my brain did, thinking about them being deer. And then I had moments like, that means you would find jackalope antlers after jackalope mating season.
That's true.
And that could be neat. But some part of my brain went like, but that's not that's never talked about you finding their antlers. Because most people don't tend to deal with the fact that antlers shed. Like, unless you're a person who actively deals with the animals or like, most other people, deer have antlers and it's just a default thought. So it doesn't get worked into the stories the same way. But then I had the idea of what if you don't find those typically because they're recycling them? And if they're island species and there's nutrient deficiency, when they make antlers, that takes a lot of calcium, and modern herbivores will often chew on bones to get calcium. We talked about this in the durophagy episode.
Both rodents / rabbits and deer are known to do this.
And if it's really, like, a deer needs to do it because you need to supplement because you're not going to get a lot of calcium from the rest of your diet.
Yes.
But if you're on an island, that might be one of the only sources of calcium you can have. So maybe they need to actually, like, I can't just gum on this and get some of, I need to eat my whole set of antlers, and that pushes them to developing more rabbit-like incisors.
Yes.
For gnawing away at these antlers.
I like that. I'll even take it a step further, an unnecessary step further, but one that I like. Because the antlers are associated with mating and competition, it could also be that the primary use of those antlers after shedding is for being a nutritional supplement for the young.
Yeah, ooh, I like that.
That the antlers are actively, like, they stick around on the head a little later into the season, and they fall off after the young have been born.
Yeah.
And the antlers are taken into the den or the nest, the burrow where they're hanging out, where their little babies are, and the babies get a lot of their starting calcium and minerals from those antlers.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. We've used this a few times on Spook-E. Honestly, less times than I would have expected. The island origin is such a nice...
It's so useful.
It's so useful.
It's so great.
You get limited resources? Awesome.
Yep.
Here's all of our stuff.
Now you need to get creative.
This also means that, and I'm sure, obviously we know that they produce milk. We know that because A, they're mammals, and B, that's part of the lore.
Yes, absolutely.
They produce milk. So you would have little baby jackalopes, feeding on mother's milk. But also the image of, like, an antler laid out in the den with half a dozen little baby jackalopes just gathered around it, chewing on it.
Oh, that actually made me think, because I was also picturing, like, a little group of them. But they make note that they are not as super reproductive as rabbits, famously. That because it's difficult with the antlers and they only do it during lightning flashes.
Sure.
But I could see it being this lining up with a couple other things of island species. Yep. You don't want to have a huge... No,
there's not room for 100 new ones.
So you only tend to have one or two or something like that.
Yep.
That also might mean they don't produce much milk. So even if you were to milk a jackalope, you wouldn't get much.
Sure.
They don't produce it for very long. They don't produce it in large quantities.
I also assume, and I don't know about small species, but I would imagine that deer don't have a litter of baby deer, even small ones.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Big ungulates tend to have, like, one, maybe two at a time.
That's to my knowledge.
So, because these aren't rabbits.
Yes, exactly.
These are not making tons of babies the way that rabbits or rodents necessarily do.
Cool. Ooh, I like all that.
This is great.
This is fantastic.
And the other thing that I like about this angle we've gone with, is that this animal would be adorable.
It would be so cute.
It would be a tiny little, rabbit-sized deer.
It would be
with little antlers and little hoof paws.
Yep, doing those little dainty steps that deer do as they move around.
And then, like, bounding across the field with those graceful bounds with his little little teeth up front.
If you approached one, they'd square up on you.
Yeah.
And be
all bugle at you. Yes, exactly. Listeners, if you have made it this far into the podcast without us recommending that you go look up what an elk bugle sounds like, Go look it up and then imagine that, but like pitched up for a tiny creature.
Make it way smaller.
Yeah.
Woo! Well, it's once again like the grasshopper mouse that howls, and it's just this.
Yes, it would be that. Well, it would be a little lower than that because it's a tenor.
Exactly. Like
we've been told that it's a tenor.
And I would love for it to be one of those animals that is like slightly unnervingly human sounding.
Absolutely.
Like you get those animals to where it's just like,
like goats.
Yes, when goats scream and make noises, it just sounds like a person sometimes.
It's just like, that's just a person.
And then like, what is it, foxes that will sound like a screaming person? Like someone getting murdered?
I've heard that about rabbits too, actually. That rabbits will scream and it sounds very unnerving.
It would be fun where it's just like, coincidentally, this one has very similar vocal chords, vocal resonance to us. So when you hear one, you're like, hello?
Yep.
Hello?
Yes. Who's out there?
Yoo-hoo to you too, I guess. What?
I love our jackalope. This is a great creature that we have made.
Well, and it could be one of those, because like typically, we talk about the fact that island species and environments are fragile and they don't do well with the competition of the wider world. Mm-hmm. But there are rare occasions where it's like, no, turns out once this is brought off the island, it just adjusts to the normal world, and actually it's still very flexible either behaviorally or diet-wise or whatever it is, and it can still do quite well.
Yeah, well, I think the idea of a species that evolved to, because of the limited food availability, it has to be able to eat basically whatever it finds. Mm-hmm. That could then serve it very well when it gets introduced to the wider ecosystems. And also, I could totally see a hyper-aggressive thing the size of a jackrabbit being a bit too much for some of the predators in the... Like, if you're a hawk or a rattlesnake or something, you go, you know what? There's mice.
Yes.
I don't have to put up with this. There are animals that just run away, and I can catch those.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I also love the idea, then, of the expanded part of the lore being someone saying, I swear I saw one. It was a rabbit with antlers. And then they find some jackalope antlers, and then they stick them onto a rabbit. They go, it looked like this. Yes. And people are like, get out of here. Quit making stuff up.
Yeah.
Love it.
Oh, and it'd be so fun, because it would also be one of those where it's like, if you were teaching about this animal, you'd be like, now, I know it looks like a rabbit, but actually, if we take a close look at its feet, and if we take a close look at its back teeth, it'd be like talking about the manatee, where it's like, I know this looks weird, but if we look at the teeth, now we can see that it's connected to elephants. If we look closely at certain things, it actually is a deer. I know that sounds weird. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. Yay. Oh,
this is great.
As has come up many times with this topic this year, I want one.
Yes,
this
is the best option. These would probably be bad pets.
They would be bad indoor pets for sure.
Yeah, like you wouldn't actually want.
You could farm, like you could have these out in your field
for the milk.
Yeah, like you could have these running around.
They could clear fungus out of your garden.
Yeah. Yep. But like they'd be like, it was like those videos you see of people who raise like emus and stuff, and it's just. Not that that's dangerous, but they're just obnoxious, and they're like constantly attacking them, and
like peacocks.
Yes, yeah.
Where they're just noisy, and your neighbors are like, "Your jackalopes every day at 5:00 in the morning. You got to stop them."
Oh, it's a chorus of jackalopes. Yes. That's the name for a group.
A chorus of jackalopes, absolutely. I'm thrilled with this.
Yay!
This is great.
Oh,
I'm so happy that our patrons encouraged us to make Cutie a thing.
Yes, this was so worth it.
This is 5 new additions to the Spook-E verse from this year. We have our mischievous little gremlins. We have our buzzy little fairies.
Yep.
We have our furry little salamanders. And we have our absolutely disgusting, angry little redcap.
Yep.
The creatures.
And now we have cute, adorable, tiny deer jackalope.
Little deer jackalopes.
I'm very happy with these. These are delightful little nuisances to add to the Spook-E verse.
Yes.
This one also, the Jackalope feels like a great addition to the Spooky verse because it's great, cute contender for the fact that it's harmless and it's not actually scary. But like you were just saying, it would be such a pain.
Yes.
It would be so.
These would get into your garden and eat everything.
Yeah, eat everything. They'd be loud.
They would try
night.
to fight your dog if your dog was trying to scare him away.
Yeah, they'd just be annoying. They'd just be a nuisance.
Yep.
And that's great.
Yep. Once again, no dogs were harmed in in this making of this spooky episode. Every episode, we like to say, hey, listeners, we are not asking for you to do fan art. But if you do fan art, we are asking that you share it with us because we love to see it. I have rarely wanted fan art more.
Yeah.
for a spooky creature than our little dear jackalope.
Yeah. I really want to see it.
This is how we get the artists in on it, is we make cute stuff.
Yes.
That's how we trick people into making fan art for us.
Mm-hmm. If you want to share that, there's the Discord channel. You
Absolutely.
can comment, discuss, share your ideas for a jackalope or any of the other creatures this year. Share fan art. If you can also send us emails or comments on other of our social media.
Mm-hmm.
If you do make fan art and you are willing for it to be shared on our website, please tell us so and let us know how you should be credited.
Absolutely. That is 5 episodes of Spook-E down. It's not done because the second weekend in November, on the 9th, at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we have a spooky live stream.
Yeah! So we'll be able to discuss all the stuff and you can ask all the questions you had to ask, you thought of to ask while you were listening.
Absolutely. Hop down to the episode description to find links to our website where we'll have lists of the other episodes we did. We'll also be putting the fan art up there as we get fan art and permission to do so.
And you can see all the fan art from the years past. There's such good art. Our listeners are so creative and awesome.
So good.
There's so many cool pieces up there, so check those out and enjoy.
Also down in the episode description, you'll find a link to our Patreon. If you like this kind of stuff that we do, we would love to do more of this exact kind of thing. We're doing more and more as the years go by, and the support on Patreon allows us to keep doing stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So please support us if you don't already. Thank you for considering it. Thank you for listening. Thank you to everybody who gets in on the hype for spooky season every year. This has been a good one.
So we'll see you on the live stream, and then it's just another year until we get spooky again.
I'm so excited for another year of spooky.
Oh, it's gonna be good. See you then.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Common Descent podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and check our WordPress blog for pictures and links after each episode. Huge thanks to our patrons whose support helps keep this podcast running and who get access to bonus goodies on Patreon. The song you're hearing is called On the Origin of Species by Protodome, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.